Today's guest has been guiding fly anglers through Montana's legendary waters for nearly 2 decades. Floating high water on Rock Creek, dialing in the dry dropper rigs on the Clark's Fork, and adapting on the fly when the Bitterroot blows out. By the end of this episode, you'll get practical tips for reading water, how to choose bugs during the stonefly season, how you can rig for high water, and how to fish Missoula like a pro. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the species we all love. Jake Hensley, the Missoula fly guy, joins us today to talk tactics. He talks about why shorter rod might be a better choice in some situations, how to actually fish a chubby Chernobyl correctly, and the mistake most anglers make when mending. We also find out why floating Rock Creek can unlock a lot more water than just hiking it, how to match your rig to pressure and depth, and what Jake teaches his daughter that most adults miss entirely. Here he is, Jake Hensley. You can find him at MissoulaFlyGuy.com. How you doing, Jake?
Good. How are you doing, Dave?
Great. Yeah, this is really great to have you on the podcast today. We are going to talk about an area. I think we're going to talk Missoula, which is an area I've been to quite a few times, that part of the world in Montana. But also we're going to talk about just probably some techniques, maybe get into some rainbow brown trouts and brown trout fishing and all of that. But before we get in there real quick, let's take it back to fly fishing. I always like to start there. You know, how'd you get into this? What's your first memory? And then we'll take it into your outfitting you do there.
I've been fly fishing here in Missoula, Montana for about 18 years now. Kind of got into it the way a lot of people do, as far as seeing some videos or having a friend or a family member that was doing it. And I'd say my first look at it was living in Missoula. Obviously, a river runs through it, the video, the movie, the book.
It's awesome to go back to the book because that has come up obviously a lot over the years. You know, we've had the creative director of that movie was on. You got the guy that actually was like, stood in for Brad Pitt and some of the characters, right? So we've covered a lot. It's been amazing. And actually that was the time, right? 2005. No, it was a decade before when that movie came out, I think, right?
Yeah. And I feel like the buzz is still around with that movie. You know, people that are getting into it or that come to visit in Missoula or have any know about it still touch back on that movie.
So you still hear from people that are coming through like on trips or just in general around Missoula?
Mostly the trips and the people that are still interested in the fly fishing or that I talk to. But the people that are visiting here, everyone kind of has something to say about it. A lot of people just think it's a movie and don't really understand how it all comes from the book. But just the whole aspect of that was a great introduction to fly fishing for people that had no clue what it was, I feel like. And for me, going to college, you know, sitting around in the dorm room, popping that movie in after, and then, you know, exploring the book a little bit too. It just seemed like it worked out great to kind of get me, I guess, fueled to go out into the river and try it. And, you know, growing up, I grew up in Wyoming and my dad took us out and we did a lot of spin rod fishing and at least, you know, touched the water and got involved with angling at a young age. But the fly fishing thing came later on in life. And I would say when I saw that movie, it just kind of lit the fire. For me, I got out, and a good friend of mine who was born and raised in Helena, he kind of had the gear and just kind of showed me a few tricks. And he took me up to Rock Creek, and Rock Creek is just east of Missoula, and it's just a blue ribbon fishery. At the time, I kind of still didn't know quite anything about it. And he took me up there. We went up to the Dalles Walking Bridge, which is a few miles up there on the dirt road. And we walked across the bridge, and I watched him catch 30 trout on a fly rod. And wow. I sat there learning, tangling, untangling, but it was just like the wow factor was there for me. I watched him catch them. I caught probably 3 or 4 fish, lost, I think 50% of those, and realized that, man, this is quite the journey you can get into. And seeing him do it, you know, that just led me to continue to want to do it more. And so I spent, 2 years at least just learning and struggling with the fly rod, not having a lot of success, but still getting out there and enjoying it and enjoying what comes with being in the river. And that's kind of how I got my hand on my first rod and got into it.
That's it. Yeah, I love that you mentioned Rock Creek because that's a place I've spent a lot of time. I went out there for my first time, I think when I was like 12 or 13. My brother, I was just actually talking to my brother just yesterday, but I went out with him, him as an adult with my other brother and a friend, and we did this road trip. And I was like the little 13-year-old kid that was tagging along. I hooked myself in the eye like 3 times on that trip. But I remember all that because that's where we fished. We fished Rock Creek. That, you know, we went up to the blast area above. What is it about Rock Creek? Because you've got all these other big rivers, these famous rivers, the Bitterroot, the Clark Fork. What is Rock Creek? How is it different from the others? Is it just smaller? Is the fishing as good there? Do you feel like it's kind of not on the radar quite as much?
I feel like it is. It's, you know, it's off the grid a little bit. You're up in the mountains, no cell phone service, obviously. It's been a pretty rugged road as far as I've always known. It's getting better. They're improving it, but it's kind of out there. And I think for the angler or person that wants to explore, if you're willing to drive, hit a crappy road and go explore a little bit, it's just got these hidden pockets. You can still find some quiet spots to fish by yourself, and it's got a high fish count. You know, I think that's a big thing. You get someone on there that if you get in the right spot, you can catch the numbers. And I know above the Dalles, I haven't checked for years, but last I checked, I think it was in the 1,500 fish per mile range, which is in that upper stretch of river. And I think it drops the lower you get, but you go there and you kind of have some quiet fishing in a really pretty spot, and the fish are there. The numbers are there. I don't see a lot of size in there, but you know, you go out there and you can catch a lot of fish and you can get the rod bet. And that gets a lot of people excited about fishing, right?
Yeah, it does. You know, another thing we want to touch on, today is going to be a challenge because we got a lot to talk about. You know, I want to definitely talk about Rock Creek. I want to talk about the Clark Fork and everything else you do there. But I also want to talk about Pescador on the fly because, you know, we've been working with Jeff and what he has going. And I just got off the river on a trip. I was fishing, and I was fishing mostly his rod, the 5-weight. And it's just like a super awesome rod. Like, I don't know what it is exactly. You know, Jeff could probably explain better. But it's light. It casts kind of super effectively for everything. We're going to get into that in a little bit later, but maybe just give us a primer on that. What are you using for Pescador? Are you kind of using a number of different sizes, weights, or what's your typical rod?
You know, I'm rocking that El Jefe, which is his mid-range rod for a 6-weight right now. And he's working on getting the El Rey out, I think in a 4-piece 6-weight as well. But so for me, the El Jefe mid-range 6-weight is a rod I'm carrying for clients and myself. And then I'm also, for my main rods in the boat right now, I'm rocking the 5-weight El Reys, and I like them. The main thing is about them that I'm noticing is how light they are. And sometimes people don't notice that at first, but when you hold a rod all day and you got a guy like me that's instructing you to kind of just beat the water and hit all these spots, you know, a full day of fishing, that extra weight starts to show off in the end. And I will say that El Rey is light. And
it is.
I do prefer a 6-weight in some scenarios, but what I've noticed is I like the fast action, little stiffness with that El Rey 5, and that rod will carry whatever I need it to. You know, I had clients throwing little streamers on it, slop rigs, which is a streamer nymph setup, because I've been wanting to rep that rod because I like it so much. And everybody says the same thing. It's like, man, it feels like I'm casting a feather.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. You're right. It's super light, and you notice it right away because I was using a few different rods, and you're like, oh wow, there's that. And then, you know, I was fishing the salmon fly, you know, the giant salmon fly hatch. So I was casting big bugs all week, and it was just super easy, you know, super smooth. So I'm excited. And in fact, at the end, it was pretty cool for the trip because my daughter, who is almost 13, she's had a rod for a long time, but she's never really gotten fully into fly fishing. And this trip, she I think we did it. And she was like, by the end of the coast, I was like, hey, she was using this fiberglass rod, which I got her when she was probably 7, you know, which was great, right? It was recommended from one of our guests back then, a few years back. And it's great, but she's ready for the next level. And I was like, you know what? Why don't you take this rod? And I gave her, and she was stoked. So she's going to be using the Pescador on the fly. That's going to be her new rod, the 5-weight, same thing.
Oh yeah, that's I mean, what a great rod to get somebody into, and that's what keeps fishing fun for me, is seeing, you know, the future, and you get these kids involved. I have two little boys, and we're getting there, but we're not quite to the fly fishing part yet. We're just getting the rod in the hands, but that's what really makes it exciting. And you take a El Rey, and Jeff's also got this 4-weight. I believe it's the El Rey 4-weight that is really impressive as well. And that's probably going to be one of the first rods my kids are rocking right there, is that 7-foot 4-weight, which is similar to what we're learning on right now.
Yeah, that's it. The 7-foot. Yeah. There's something about that when they're small, right? They don't need a 9-foot. Actually, the smaller rods are a good way to go.
No, and you know, as well as I do, when you start seeing those kids get into fly fishing, that, I mean, I feel like it rejuvenates my excitement for fly fishing.
Yeah, it does. It does. I know my daughter was sitting in the boat, in the drift boat, like going through all my fly boxes and like studying the flies, right? And as she had giant sand flies. In fact, I'm not the best on the entomology, but there was also like some sort of a drake hatch. It wasn't huge, but you note it, right? You notice it
Yeah.
because it's these giant mayflies. And I don't know, what would that be? What would be your guess? This was, I'm not sure if you know the Deschutes or just in general, but what would be this time of year? What drakes would you see potentially out there?
Just from comparing it to the Montana time of year, I bet gray drakes. That's kind of like our big hatch that kind of happens late spring is gray drakes. March browns obviously seem to be part of that drake family, but the gray drakes have been popping off, and we're seeing some big bugs here right now too. I've saw some big mayflies, and you're branching into that PMD time of year, so. But I've seen, June we get the green drakes, gray drakes, and which are the bigger, the mayflies. And man, you sure know when they show up because they're big. They fly right by you, and you go, wow, look at that mayfly.
Totally. That's awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue because I want to talk more about the areas you fish and kind of what you're doing as far as techniques and things like that. So, when this episode goes live, I think it's probably going to be closer to August, which is definitely a time of year where things get really hot and all of that. But let's take it to right now. It's springtime. It's kind of, May, June. What's that look like for you? Are you fishing, all of these rivers? Or are you focusing more on one of them for your clients?
For us, May and June typically are our high water runoff seasons. I will branch over and fish the Missouri River a lot, which is a short drive. It's 2 hours, hour and 45 minutes from Missoula. I was over there yesterday. Some nymphing. The PMDs have showed up over there, so the dry fly fishing can be fantastic over there.
Oh, right. And is that the only tailwater in your area?
It is. There's some small tailwaters, but as far as like a big main tailwater, that is it. You branch further towards the Ennis area and get to the Beaverhead, and as far as close to Missoula itself, the Bitterroot has this small little tailwater, kind of a tailwater, I'd say, which is a dam-fed river, which is the west fork of the Bitterroot. Now that meets with the east fork of the Bitterroot, and there's a lot of tributaries that pour into that as well. So it kind of eliminates what I consider like a true tailwater. So as far as the tailwater and main tailwaters, you're going to just get the Missouri River with those, salbug scuds and stuff like that. But for rest of Missoula, we're looking at freestones, and that's why it's hard to balance the time of year for the runoff, our water levels. Right? It's very unpredictable, and right now coming into June, speaking of salmon flies, which you were talking about,
yeah,
it's that time of year, and so when our main rivers like the Clark Fork, the Blackfoot, the Bitterroot are too big and muddy, you start to get these tributaries around here that are really starting to punch, and they have enough flow to some of them you can get a boat down. For instance, Rock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so Rock Creek is, if you've wade fished Rock Creek, you look at it and you go, no way you're getting a boat down this. Well, I think I checked today and it's pushing at 1,700 cubic feet per second.
Wow, 1,700. No kidding.
Yeah, and I fished Rock Creek from the top end about 2,100 all the way down to about 700 is the lowest I've really floated it. Now, there's a stretch of Rock Creek that's a special permit for outfitters and guides. I think they only allow 200 a year, but the upper stretch of Rock Creek is not permitted for outfitters and guides.
And are you floating it in like a small little like pontoon boat, one-man thing?
No, I'm running a full-size boat through there.
Wow, you can get a full-size. I guess it's been a while since I've been out there, but I picture Rock Creek. I mean, sometime, I guess in the summer, July, you can wade across it, but you're talking water's pushing, and it's not wide though, right? It's not a wide creek.
No, I would say it's probably one of our most dangerous rivers to fish and float here too. It's one of those things you need to be on your A game and know what you're doing on the sticks, and people get themselves into trouble. But it goes from this 300 to 600 CFS of very wadeable water, and you're looking at it like, oh, this is the perfect walk and wade water, other than the slippery rocks, obviously. But then all of a sudden you get this big push of water, and it is like strap on and go for a whitewater fishing ride.
Right. So why would the boat? It seems like access is pretty good from the road. What does the boat give you during those higher water times?
So just typically with that high water runoff, you're starting to get these fish that are living in the middle of the river. They kind of get conglomerated, pushed towards the banks, I'd say, or into that pocket water that's off the banks. And when you get higher water, you're having a hard time getting a drift. When you're getting a big push of water, trying to fish it from the bank, you're getting these lightning quick drifts, right?
Yeah, right.
Small, short seconds worth of drifts. Where when you're from the boat, you still have the ability to make long drifts along those banks, kind of pinpoint your shots.
Gotcha. So you're drifting. So you're pretty much not anchoring up. You're kind of floating and drifting and fishing.
It is float and drift. And I would say when it's firing up there, I have clients, I prep them. You do a safety spiel, you do a prep on, hey, 95% of the fish that my clients catch, I net them, I do all the work. But man, on that river, I've had multiple times I hand the net to my guy or lady and say, here, it's all you. You might have to net your own fish. You might have to pull a hook out. It can get sporting up there, and the guy or person rowing needs to be on their A game, and that might include you doing a little bit of your own work, even though you're on a guided trip. But that's how you keep everybody safe.
Gotcha. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, this sounds cool. So you could be doing that right now. I mean, when the Bitterroot's blown out, you might be able to head up to a Rock Creek or a Trib to some of these bigger ones and do this, or walk and wait it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think the upper Rock Creek, middle Rock Creek is a play right now. A good friend of mine's heading up there today. I've heard the salmon flies are buzzing around already. The West Fork of the Bitterroot and the East Fork of the Bitterroot, those are same thing, small, kind of higher up tributaries that flow into the big rivers. And you get a boat on there if you know what you're doing. And man, I mean, big days on Rock Creek. The numbers are so good and the hatches are so prolific, anywhere from drakes, salmon flies, caddis, to where on a big day on the Rock Creek, man, I've had 100 fish days,
Wow.
with clients, with friends, with my wife. I've seen it all up there, and I, run dry droppers. And as the season progresses and the more years I've spent on these smaller rivers, I change my tactics and, depending on the expectation of clients and stuff. But, there's many a days I've ran upper Rock Creek and later in June when it's still high and just thrown single dry flies. And man, what a blast. Go catch 30 fish. Maybe not 18 inches, but a lot of nice 14 to 15-inch fish and catching them on single dry flies. Obviously running pretty high powered tippet on that because you don't want to be breaking off in the bushes, and you don't want to be taking your time on a 14-inch fish that's ripping 1700 CFS when the white water is ahead of you.
Yeah, and you got and there are some kind of like rapids and things like that in there.
It seems like it's a lot of rapids, a lot of whitewater mixed with strainers, a lot of boulders, a lot of rock dodging. But the thing that makes our rivers dangerous, any river to me, is the wood.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, put a life jacket on, fall in the river in a boulder section. As long as you got your feet in the air and you're swim and navigate the boulders. But man, those logs and strainers, that's what makes things dangerous. And with our high water, and you go from 600 CFS to 2000 CFS, you're going to see some wood being moved down the river, and trees that have either fallen or that got attacked by a beaver. They're going to make their way down to a place that might set you up for a gnarly scenario on the boat. You got to be ready for. So the people that are still guiding Rock Creek consistently, those mostly it's a young guy game. I do know some older guys are still up there getting it, but man, you got to be in shape. You got to be ready to go. And
that's it.
Yeah, it's exciting. I will say it's a very exciting trip up there. It's like I said, you're getting a kind of full mix of emotions when you're running Rock Creek.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like, you know what I mean? You're talking, I mean, like I said, I've been up there a number of times and never had done that. Although I'd thought about it. And I think one year I might even have brought up something, but I've always thought about that. Like, yeah, this would be cool to float with a little pontoon boat, or whatever, something like that.
Yeah. The access is great up there, but still there's spots that, you would have to bushwhack for miles to get to some really sneaky, I'd say, holes where you get to them from a boat and pour over. Some spots you're not going to cross a river certain times a year up there, especially now. And when you have that boat and that access, man, you do have a big advantage, and to fish at fish that aren't getting played at very often.
Yeah, it separates you from, it's just like anything, right? You kind of, if you're hike a little further to get away from the people. Here's a way to do something that you can get you away from the crowds in some other areas, right? Because people either don't have a boat, don't want to, don't have the experience and stuff like that. Have you been rowing a raft of drift boats, or I'm not sure. Have you been doing this quite a while?
I have been. I've been on Rock Creek doing the whole boat thing for quite a while with myself. I started off, my wife and I at the time were dating, and I found a good deal on a boat. And I think I have to go back, but it has to be about 14 years ago.
What was your boat, the first boat you found?
First boat was like a 14-foot Air.
Air Puma or something like that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was like a D class, like definitely a big whitewater overnight excursion boat. Got into the whole trailer. The whole setup was a great setup, but I think I want to say we paid $4,000 for frame, boat,
Oh, that's
trailer,
pretty good.
straight out of college, getting set up.
That'll probably cost you 10,000 now, right?
Oh, easily, and it's a big market. So used boats don't last long around Missoula, that's for sure. And, we started just the Clark Fork and I'd say the middle, lower Clark Fork and the Blackfoot are pretty safe plays. And we started just kind of venturing there and making our way up to even the Flathead River and kind of just doing all the rounds in Montana. And that's what got me into the boating. And as I got more experience on the sticks, I started venturing off and doing I'd say more technical rivers. The Bitterroot is a sneaky river. It changes every year. So you have to be ready to navigate new wood and fresh wood there. And then same with Rock Creek, you don't want to go up on Rock Creek unless you know what you're doing. And I was at least smart enough or was advised by mentors of mine to, make sure you're on your game before you get them branch off into these kind of more technical rivers. And I was, and the more years I got under my belt, under the sticks, everything got easier. And I'd say that to anybody, go find the river that's easier to row. And once you start learning the basics, then branch off. And I also had a bunch of friends around here that were, kayakers and whitewater specialists that they definitely gave me a heads up on how to row a boat at a young age. So that was beneficial to me when I started guiding. I had that set of skills when I stepped in the boat with clients that, I was safe. And that's a big thing when you're taking people down the river, right? Is let's be safe first.
Yeah, safety is for sure number one. Well, obviously you have the Missoula Fly Guy. Missoula is in your, in your brand. Talk about that a little bit. What makes Missoula so special? What are you've talked about all the rivers, I think. Are there any other ones you'd mention here?
I think what makes Missoula so unique and special is that those three rivers, and our rivers are basically fishable for the most part year round. Obviously, we have our inset seasons, which is usually March through October, just because that's when you are getting the bugs and the water temps are conducive to fishing. But Missoula, just a little more. I used to kind of spurt out these numbers to clients, but I want to say there's like 60 boat ramps within Missoula. So what I kind of take from that is I take my clients out, and a lot of times we're not running into a lot of people still. I would like to say that Missoula is still kind of a secret on the map as far as come to a place where you're not going to run into a lot of boats if you have the right guide or the right friend that's taking you down the river. There's 3 different main rivers around here, including these tributaries like Rock Creek or the Bitterroot, West Fork of the Bitterroot, East Fork of the Bitterroot. Like I said, you can branch off, but man, I definitely wake up in the morning and make my mind up where I'm going as I start making phone calls. I've never called or phoned in a trip the night before.
Oh, Roy. So you wait till then that morning and you decide where you're going.
Yeah. And actually when I send an email out to my clients to let them know, our decision isn't made. And if you have a preference, hey, my grandpa, I'd like to fish the Bitterroot, I'd like to get up there, we're going to go do that. But man, I wake up the morning, I'm looking at forecasts, I'm looking at the water flows. And the shuttle guys, these guys that run our cars around, that make sure that our cars are waiting for us at the next takeout, these guys and girls, they hold the keys to our success as far as not putting on around a bunch of people. So I think what does make us unique is you can see a lot of different things in Missoula. You're going to see different types of fishing, methods of fishing, types of rivers. And then if you have the right guide, like I said, you're going to go out there and find a little hole and maybe have the whole river to yourself. And that is sometimes during our busiest times of year, I will find myself out there all alone with just me and my clients catching fish on a Montana river without seeing 5 other boats around you.
Right. That is amazing. The Clark Fork, the Blackfoot, the Bitterroot, are they all kind of equal to you, or do you have one that you kind of tend to fish more throughout the year?
I tried to look back on that every year. Sometimes I find that maybe one year I'm more of a Blackfoot guide than and 1 year maybe more of a Bitterroot guide than I should be. But I tell people that hop in the boat, we try to stay nomadic. We don't really want to make our mind up on a river. Certain years, like last year, we kind of had a lower water year. The Blackfoot and the Bitterroot, they kind of drained out a little bit as far as our drought went. So I would obviously utilize those and bounce back to them during a week. But I kind of stayed on the Clark Fork a lot last year because we seem to have more water on there. So I'd say for last year, for me, the Clark Fork was a big play just because it did have the water. But that is, like, once again, that's what makes Missoula awesome is you wake up in the morning and there's 3 rivers anywhere from 10-minute drive to an hour drive, you can find yourself doing something completely different. And I have clients that I've fished a long time, going on 10 years now, that I swear, I took a girl the other day. I bet I fished this lady 25, 30 times in the last 8 years. And she told me, we have never done this stretch of river. I mean, that's an amazing feat.
So you're able to fish a ton of different areas. That's what's cool about it. I think that, and it's not, and we've heard this before from some real experts, guides and people that have been on, is that's the cool thing you can do. You don't have to fish the same exact stretch every week or, every year even, right? You can find these different, it sounds like there's plenty of new areas in your area you can fish.
Yeah, there is. And I would say that's one of my selling points for clients is I tell them, I'm not going to bring you here every year and take you to do the same thing. Obviously, if that's something you want to repeat and do and see again, because maybe it was so awesome, let's do that. But let's go explore and let's go do new things. And as a guide, that's one thing that keeps me really interested in guiding. And I don't feel like I've ever gotten burnt out or close to it. I'm going on my 10th year guiding. Not that I'm the most veteran seasoned guide out there, but for being 10 years into it, man, it's still exciting to me because I get to go and do adventures. I never have a plan made up that week. And most of my clients that hop in are all cool with going on an adventure. So that is one thing I'd say, like, let's go fish the upper Blackfoot tomorrow. And then you might find me an hour and a half away on the upper Bitterroot one day. And then on the very third day with Jeff Ditzworth,
yeah,
we drove over to the Missouri just to go chase something different. And he's down for a drive, and so am I. So we hopped in our 45-minute drive and we cruised over and fished the canyon of the Missouri. And yeah, he had a 3-day trip that was just completely all over the board.
Oh, he did. So where'd you guys start out? So when Jeff came up, where was day one?
So day one, Jeff comes down here the last week of April, which is a sneaky play because if we hold on to our lower water, you see some phenomenal hatches, fluttering squallas, and very, very low competition as far as other outfitters, guides, and recreational floaters tend to get off the river. So we started our first day on the lower Clark Fork there around like Superior, Montana, or St. Regis. And we did catch the fluttering squalla hatch and a big March Brown hatch. The water was coming up, so it was starting to get a little murky, but we got it done. I think we ended like a nice 15-fish day and a couple heavy ones.
Are these mostly a mix of browns and rainbows?
That day was strictly rainbows and cut bows and cutthroat. We get that hybrid cut bow in there.
What are the cutthroat? Are those West Slope cutthroat?
Yep, West Slope cutthroat. Those are our native fish here. The West Slope cutthroat are the mainstayers. They've been here forever. So rainbows and brown trouts were obviously introduced a long time ago, but you get that the cutthroats are what a lot of people want to come here and fish. So, and then to the next day with Jeff, we switched from the lower Clark Fork. Everything was starting to trickle out. The Bitterroot was kind of blowing out, and we ran up to the upper Clark Fork there. I'd say around just like not too far out east of Missoula. I'd say around like the Clinton to Rock Creek area, kind of where Rock Creek pours in there.
Does Rock Creek pour into the Clark Fork?
Yep. Rock Creek flows into the Clark Fork, which makes it bigger, and then the Blackfoot flows in, same thing, making it a bigger river. And they all kind of flow into the Clark Fork. But, in the upper Rock Creek, you kind of get more of brown trout fishery. And the day with Jeff, I think we just caught brown trout. I think we ended the day with the same thing, about 15 to 16.
Where did you fish on day two?
The upper Clark Fork there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you fished that upper area around Rock Creek.
Yeah, which is crazy because the Clark Fork being one river, the upper Clark Fork is a vast difference in the lower Clark Fork. The lower Clark Fork is a huge river. You can run a jet boat down there.
Oh, wow.
A big boat. Yeah. I mean, so it's, a very large river. At that point in the lower Clark Fork, the Bitterroot, the Blackfoot, Rock Creek, the Little Blackfoot, they've all, converged into the Clark Fork, making it the biggest river on the lower end. And then if you drive east on the Clark Fork, you go through Missoula and you go to where it is very small. I mean, we're talking the size of the interstate, if not smaller, right? Like a 2-lane road at some points. And it turns from same thing, rainbows, cutthroats, and brown trout to more of a brown trout fishery. The higher you go, even all the way up towards Deer Lodge, it just becomes more brown trout. So with the second day with Jeff, it was the upper Clark Fork, and it was all brown trout. We had the same thing, fluttering squallas, and actually our best bug that day was a caddis. We got this Mother's Day caddis hatch that he kind of landed on the nose when he showed up, and then some big brown trout, which is cool. And then fast forward to day 3, Jeff's always loving the Missouri. He likes to go, and you can also branch off and use all of his different rods up there. So we loaded up the quiver. I think we had 6 rods because he's obviously doing a little R&D. So we had all 6 rods in the tailwater skiff there, and we fished the canyon of the Missouri to finalize our 3-day trip. And like I said, all over the board. And same thing. I mean, landed some big brown trout, consistent, great size rainbow trout. And yeah, like I said, high five, drive home, and Jeff will probably be back to experience it all again.
Right. Yeah. No, it sounds like a great 3-day and diverse too. What you're in on your boat? Are you floating? It sounds like you got a drift boat. Is that what you're mostly using out there?
Yeah, so for the most part, I run a drift boat and a raft. I'd say the drift boat's my Cadillac, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's comfort, space, ease, stand up, a lot of room. We'll cruise mostly lower Bitterroot, lower Clark Fork, and upper Clark Fork in the drift boat. And then I'm using my raft, which is my Jeep, right? The
Yep.
4-wheel drive.
Oh yeah.
Rock Creek, West Fork of the Bitterroot, upper Bitterroot's same thing. There's some diversion dams and stuff. You want to be pretty nimble and mobile up there, I'd say. So, and same with the Blackfoot. The Blackfoot has a lot of white water and some tricky rowing spots. It's just great to have the old 4-wheel drive raft with you.
Yeah. Is that a row drift boat?
Yep, I'm running the row drift boat, tailwater skiff, and then I'm running an NRS Otter, the 13-foot. And I like to keep everything really light in the raft, just so portages, dragging around down trees, stuff like that. And then I got a jet boat, like a 18-foot John boat, jet boat style, and I'll run that around on the lower Clark Fork and cover some ground sometimes. We do a little pike fishing around here too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you can branch all the way down to like Plains area, which is way down on the lower Clark Fork, and you can find yourself in the middle of some trout fishing, some bass fishing, and some pike fishing down there. So
where does the Clark Fork eventually flow into?
Flows into this lake reservoir called Lake Pend Oreille.
Oh, Pend Oreille, right. In Idaho, right?
Yeah, it is in Idaho, and that's where it all kind of settles up there. And there's a big dam there called Cabinet Gorge Dam, and kind of flows. And there's a series of dams between Missoula and Lake Pend Oreille. You get Thompson Falls, so you get a lot of dam control in there, which is why the fishery changes a little bit through there. It kind of goes from this cool cold water fishery to almost a warm water fishery, similar to the Missouri. And the more dams that stack up, you get more bass fishing. There's another reservoir, Noxon Reservoir, in the town called Trout Creek down there it's phenomenal for pike, bass, walleye, all that stuff. And that's all still connected to the Clark Fork. And then
Clark Fork. Okay.
Yeah, you branch your way east back towards Missoula and you run into just mainly rainbows and cutthroats and brown trout. So,
okay. Yeah. So yeah, the Clark Fork, and it is the Clark Fork, not the Clark's Fork, right? It's just Clark.
Just Clark.
After Lewis and Clark, right? Obviously
Yep, exactly. And if you had to ask me what kind of guide I'd probably consider myself a Clark Fork guide. It runs right through Missoula. I am a Missoula flag guy, so
yep. I feel like that's when I was starting to, thinking about this, I was thinking the Clark Fork kept coming up to me. I just felt like, and I haven't fished the Clark Fork. I really haven't fished any of those big ones. I've mainly just fished Rock Creek, but it's the big one, right? Everything's flowing into it and it's diverse. And maybe let's go into this a little bit. We mentioned it, and maybe we could just take it back to that day with you and Jeff on day 2 up near Clinton. What is the separation? Is it Missoula that separates the upper from the lower Clark Fork?
Yes. Yep. Missoula, basically, I'd say the lower Clark Fork really builds below Missoula, west of Missoula. And that's mainly where the Bitterroot, which is a big river, flows into the Clark Fork. And when you have those two main rivers converging together, that's creating that big, the big body of water they consider the lower Clark Fork. The upper Clark Fork really too would be more above the Blackfoot. So east of Missoula, back towards Butte and Anaconda, you have that upper Clark Fork there, and it hasn't really picked up all of our tributaries. Like Clinton, you've started to see where Rock Creek pours in, you get a little more water. But once you make your way up towards Drummond and these small little kind of ranch farm towns up there, the river's really small. So the Clark Fork can be, not much wider than 20 feet across at some points. And
wow.
You could walk across the whole thing, walk and wade the whole entire river.
You can. So you can float it and you can walk and wade. Are there a lot of access points?
A lot of access points for the upper Clark Fork. And the numbers aren't as high up there. The trout numbers are a little lower on the upper Clark Fork, but if you know where they're at, you're going to get into them. And like I said, it seems to be predominantly brown trout the higher you go up there. So you can find quite a bit of brown trout and some big brown trout up there too. I think they're trying to get the numbers in check. I think they're running into issues with, they've had, some old mine tailing issues. So we have basically the world's largest Superfund site is all that area between Butte and like Deer Lodge where
Oh, wow.
where they've had issues from, bad mining years ago or just long time mining. I don't even know if it's bad mining. I just,
Right.
the times are changing, so they know how to do things a little better now. But that's what makes the Clark Fork cool. It's, one day you're throwing hoppers on a 25-foot wide river. You're throwing big giant hoppers of brown trout, and the next day, drive 70 miles and you're fishing a river that's 150 feet wide, and in a drift boat, chipping away at a little pod with tricos.
Yeah, with Trico's, right. What did you guys do when you're talk about that day with Jeff on day 2? Where did you guys put in, or what was the area did you float it?
Yeah, we were floating up there. I'd say we're right there. It's kind of like you're almost not even naming off towns there, just boat ramps. It's kind of between Drummond and Clinton, the towns, and it's like Beavertail area. We chipped away at like the hopper droppers seems to be pretty consistent for me. I call it the hopper dropper, even though that time of year we don't have the hoppers, but I'm running like a chubby Chernobyl.
Oh, yeah. And when you're running the chubby, and that was the funny thing because, it seems like that pattern is just so good for so many things. Do you think that if you had to pick one big pattern, is that kind of the one?
Yeah, for Missoula, just because of the freestone, right? We just do have so many stoneflies coming down the river. The chubby Chernobyl works great all year because you have that big section of diverse stoneflies that are coming down the river. So yeah, it works great. And then you can also use it as kind of your indicator for getting your nymph down there. And so you get a 2-for-1, right? You get the fish to kind of come up, possibly grab that big chubby Chernobyl. And if not, you're running your nymph kind of shorter. I call it like a short leash nymph setup underneath your chubby. And a lot of times I'm running same thing, a stonefly, a patch rubber legs, a hare's ear.
Oh, okay. So you're running a bigger bug. Talk about that a little bit. What does that setup, that rig look like for your dry dropper?
So my setup for that dry dropper is I'm running usually that chubby Chernobyl. I like a size 8, size 6, depending on what time of year it is. And then I'm going about 3 feet. Depends, same thing on time of year and stuff, but usually about 3 feet from the hook shank of that chubby Chernobyl down to my dropper. And a long time ago, I learned from like one of my mentors that taught me to fly fishing that Missoula is a great dry dropper fishery. We're too shallow, it seems, for deep nymphing. You don't need to run deep nymphs around here. It seems like when those fish are up and feeding and ready to go, they're not in those deep holes. They kind of move into those shallower riffles. So, and when the time of year, if it's bright and sunny, you're not really getting all the dry fly eats you might hope for. So you kind of get the best of both worlds when you're running that chubby. I call it the chubby, with that little dropper off of it. And a lot of times, I'm running pheasant tail, patch rubber legs, some sort of Frenchie or Perdigon these days, which is really popular. And yeah, chasing those fast riffle seams. And it's awesome because I really enjoy, as the season progresses and our water comes, warm water shows up with the bugs, you're fishing some fast water, and people get shocked at how fast the water can be that we're catching fish out of.
Right. So could be fishing a faster water riffle and looking for the seam within that. What does that seam look like? Is this seam just like on a break of a rock, or how do you find those?
Lower Clark Fork, you're probably looking at them where they're going to come off like a jetty rock point where you can see a riffle mending with the fast and slow water. On the upper Clark Fork or the Bitterroot, man, you might be chasing a seam right off some really sneaky wood. It seems like when you're fishing the Bitterroot, you're fishing those seams that just textbook what you would imagine fly fishing, right? You see the big root wad with a branch coming off, and you're throwing your dry fly or your whatever setup you have on right off that stick that leads into the foam. And it's pretty, I'd say textbook drift of what you can imagine fly fishing would be. And it seems like it's interesting. Every river has a different flow and a different type of setup that you're going to fish up there. And that's what Missoula, I think that's one of the things that makes it great, right? One day you're throwing hoppers on the undercut bank on the upper Clark Fork, and then the next day you're on the upper Bitterroot throwing it right off the wood somewhere. So
Gotcha. When you guys are floating down on that day, what does that look like? Are you mostly drifting and Jeff's casting to certain spots, or are you anchoring up? How do you do that?
Yeah, we're always drifting with the boat. I mean, the only time you'll really ever see me drop anchor or set up is if we're chipping away on an up and in, which I would consider like a big inside turn. inside bank and you're throwing it from the inside dead water up into the fast shallows and letting it drift through the run like you would if you were wade fishing. Sometimes we'll do that.
Now, you mean by up and in, you're saying you're drifting down and you're coming down into a big bend?
Yeah. So imagine just like the river taking a big loop to the left. You position yourself on that inside of that left-hand turn, just like if you were wade fishing from the bank.
In the pool, kind of in the eddy, the slower part.
Yeah, exactly. And then chipping up into the fast water and doing a drift, almost if you were just standing there wade fishing, kind of that proper wade fishing technique. You're doing it from a raft. So we'll pull in, do that. The only other time I'm really fishing off anchor is if we see a pod and we're trying to chase some heads and head hunt. But for the most part, it's really, I'd say, conducive for beginner anglers or people that want to get long drifts, because we're getting the fly out there in the water that works for us and the rig that we have going, and we're doing these long drifts. So you're sitting or standing in the boat and trying to get these, I always say the longest drift wins. The longer your drift, the more natural you can keep your drift going, the better chance you have of catching those fish. And I fish a pretty specific program. Once I get my clients to hop on board with what we're doing, and once they believe, it all works pretty good. And I don't fish everything. I'm only fishing to the spots where I have memorized fish. There are fish throughout the river. I try to hone in and zone in on where the fish I know live, and then we spend our time fishing to those fish. We don't want to waste our time fishing to negative space, right? Needless to say, there isn't a fish behind every rock.
How do you find, is that typically, like if somebody's listening now, and they wanted to find those fish, is it just trial and error to get out there and fish it? Or what would be your tip to them?
I'd say trial and error. Memorization is what's got me, I'd say, to my success on the river, is just memorizing where fish live. And you figure out, well, man, I went through here 3 times. I never got one. And obviously you're trying to read the build, right? So I start my day off with a rig, like a chubby dropper. And then what I'm going to do is start throwing that rig in the water that I know it works in. And then once I find the fish, I'm just going to replicate that build of water all day long, right? Every now and then I'll switch rigs up to go, oh, we're really shallow riffle here where they're just eating dry flies. I'll switch over, either switch rod or switch the rig. But for the most part, once we get our rig dialed in for the day, like our hopper dropper or our nymph rig, we're just going to go and replicate the build of that water. And I find what it is it just makes you, I'd say, you're kind of not wasting your time in the spots where the fish might not be. If there's not a lot of compression, if there's not a lot of water pushing those fish to make them stay in a certain spot, I'm going to skip those spots and kind of focus on the areas I know that we can be productive and catch the fish. You get to a big lake, a big wide lake of section of the river. I call them lakes, where it's really dead, kind of quiet water. Obviously, if a fish rises, he's going to show himself and we can go target that fish. But I'm looking at this, let's just say 100-yard stretch of river that there's not a lot of fast moving water and not a lot of boulders for the water to trickle around, which I call compression. I look out there, I see no compression. I go, man, where are the fish at? I know they're in here, but are they 10 feet from the bank? Are they 20 feet from the bank? Unless they show themselves, I can't really pinpoint and cast right at them and be highly effective with it. So I'm going to go to where there's a big bend in the river and find where all the water compresses into a hard bank and there's a soft inside. And that is where we'll kind of spend most of our time during our days. And what I do is I call it, spot hopping. And it seems like every guide runs a different program around here, but I try to do long floats, anywhere from 8 to 17-mile floats in a day. And we're just going to pick our spots, hot spot fish out to this spot.
Right. That's a good way to do it. And you get to see some country, right? You see a little more country during the day.
I've never had anybody complain about seeing more of the river.
Yeah, more of the river. That's awesome. So, and describe the leader. So you mentioned a little bit. So you have your, say, chubby is on your main. You got off of that, it's a 3-foot leader down. What do you typically use in, like, what size tippet or on that dropper?
So I'm running like 6 pound, usually for like 4X would be standard for most of the year. Honestly, a lot of the times I'm running 3X because I like to land those fish that we're catching when we're catching them around wood, when you're catching them around, obstacles or hazards in the water. You got to be able to horse them out of there every now and then. So sometimes I'll go back to fishing some lighter tippet if they're being picky, but for the most part, running 3 to 4 feet droppers, sometimes a 2-foot dropper, anywhere from 3X to 4X to get it down there. When you run in lighter tippet too, some of those bugs drop a lot faster into the column. So I have noticed, like, sometimes I have to switch up to 4X to get that little small nymph to want to drop down into the column a little faster. When you have that thicker tippet floating around, sometimes you're still wavering behind your chubby there and not getting into the column as fast as you'd like. But I will say I'd rather be geared up for the fish I want to catch rather than being geared up for the fish that we're going to catch.
Okay, so 3 to 4x, and then on your from your chubby, what does your leader look like? Is that pretty standard? How long are typically your leaders?
I'm running about a 7-foot leader. People are more beginners. We'll shorten it up just to give them like a shorter casting style there, right? You don't have to, you're trying to flip big bugs over. It's harder to do that with a 9-foot leader. But for our little chubby hopper dropper setup, I think a 7-foot leader, 3X, same thing, 7-foot 3X leader. Sometimes I'll bring the last of that off with some mono to keep it floating if I want it to float a little better. But the fluorocarbon, just fluoroflex, 7-foot tapered leader is a great way to go. And you can always chop it back and add to it if you need to make some adjustments.
Okay. And so that's the hopper dropper sort of thing. And were you on that day, were you guys fishing that mostly, or did you do any other techniques?
We did hopper dropper. We did throw a little single squala for a little bit. We had some fish look at it, but it wasn't as productive as we were getting them on the nymph. We caught them. It seemed like that for the hopper dropper, our best bug that day was either a patch rubber leg because of the fluttering squalas, but we also was throwing this little mayfly caddis. It's called a Duracell, and it actually works great. It looks like it has kind of like that body, the slender profile of a mayfly, but then, you get kind of that CDC squiggly, buggy looking stuff that makes it want to look like a caddis as well. So we actually caught our bigger fish on that. And then Jeff threw a streamer too. I like to throw JJ Sparkle minnow around up there, a couple different colors in that. But yeah, a little Creelix as well. He stripped the streamer around, trying to chase a couple dragons out of some holes, but it seemed like our best fishing still came on that hopper dropper. And with the amount of stoneflies we have around here, it's hard to go away from a big stonefly.
Yeah, the stoneflies, because you have the everything, right? I mean, the squala. And what is the squala? How does that compare to, say, a golden stone or the other stoneflies?
I'd say that the squala is the smaller. It's the first stonefly one of the first stoneflies that we get that kind of starts off our season. We get some Namuras and Capnias, which are the smallest of the stoneflies that come first. But then it's followed up with the squalas. And then after the squalas, we get our salmon flies, which are giant, right? You're looking at size 4, size 6 for a dry, or even your dropper for your stonefly dropper. But then after that, you get your golden stones, which the golden stones vary on the upper Blackfoot. I'd say the golden stones could be a size 10 and up to a size 8. And then on the Bitterroot, we have almost what I call Bitterroot stones, and they can get really small. You can get these little golden stones that look like size 12s. So, and then our final stonefly that comes in usually is in August and late July. It starts to kind of build up, and it's the nocturnal stoneflies. And nocturnal stoneflies are big.
Now, nocturnal, what are the nocturnal? Are those the ones that describe those a little bit?
So nocturnal stoneflies are almost the same size as salmon fly. And the nocturnal stoneflies usually hatch. I think the water temps need to be a little warmer. So that's why you start getting that hatching in July and August. And when those nocturnal stoneflies hatch, they're big. Same thing, size 6. And they seem to be more of swimmers. I think I don't see them flying as much, probably because they maybe are flying at nighttime when they're most active, because they are hatching in the middle of the morning or the middle of the night. And you're trying to pick up on that hatch when you put on early in the morning, obviously. But it seems like when I see those nocturnal stoneflies, they're swimming on the top of the water more than I see them actually flying through the air. And so I get a lot of clients, when we're making mends to, continue our drift to be a longer drift, and we're mending it downriver, mending upriver, whichever direction. I tell clients, don't be afraid to put a little movement on that stonefly, on that chubby when you're mending, because you'd be surprised how many fish want to come up and attack that stonefly when you move it. And then a lot of times with our stoneflies around here, the dead, still perfect drift, man, they've seen that. Sometimes you need a little, if you can teach the twitch can add a little special bonus.
What is the twitch? How would you describe the twitch?
There's different ways. I think I try to teach people this method. The rake mend is the way I was taught, where you're doing like a little Zorro loop with the tip of your rod, and you're doing a small little articulated mend. And that mend is just going to drag your fly downriver without sinking it, right? And so you get these little short drags of the squala, stonefly, which one it is. Also, tip up in the air with a little shake works. It seems like when people try to do that, it sometimes makes it harder to set the hook on those because you're kind of rod tip up in a little awkward angle and you're giving a little shake on the tip. But the fluttering stonefly can be a very productive way to fish up here. Obviously, our bigger stoneflies are definitely those flutters, right? Seems like the squala hatch on the Bitterroot's kind of a smaller squala. They don't really flutter as much as you would get on the lower Clark Fork in late April. Those squalas are a lot bigger and they move, man. And the fish want to see them move. The fish, I tell people, man, that all of a sudden you start twitching that fly, it makes that fly become real life and comes alive, and those fish want to eat it. And same with hoppers, man. Hoppers,
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, because we're talking stoneflies here. You mentioned, the whole series, like I guess 6 or 7 different species. But yeah, you've got hoppers too, and that chubby Chernobyl also, right, can imitate a hopper during the season.
Definitely. It definitely can imitate a hopper. You'll find I'd like to fish the hopper a little different too. And a lot of times in the late summer in August, I'm fishing the single dry fly a lot more than you'd expect, whether it is a single nocturnal stonefly or I'm necking it down to just like a moorish or a more or less hopper. And same thing, I like to run heavy tippet on those things because you get some aggressive takes and making a move. The rake mend seems to be the best with teaching people. They just mend it. I'm telling people, oh, mend, another mend it again. And all of a sudden, every time you mend it, that fly is just doing a little bit of happy with that.
Yeah. How do you mend? Describe that a little bit. What's your tip on mending? Or does it matter if you mend and the fly goes down a little bit, or you got different currents? What are your tips there?
I'd say any mend's a good mend. When people start mending on their own, that's great. I'm always constantly reminding people to mend. I'm a talker in the boat. I don't ever go quiet. I would say that I learned that at a young age playing sports and stuff. When your coach stops talking to you, you know that you're in that you're not doing, you're like, man, he lost me,
Right.
So I don't ever stop talking. I got the gift of gab and I stay on my clients for the mend. So I tell them any mend is better than no mend. If you're getting a drag free drift, that's what we want. Obviously, there's certain scenarios. If you're head hunting, you don't want that fly to move. You're head hunting, you're throwing slack. You got to have this clean drift. But man, when you're talking about these big stone flies and your big giant size 4 hoppers that I like to throw, fish want to see those things come live. So when you're mending upstream ends, downstream ends, man, bring that fly alive. You don't want to move it 4 feet, but a couple inches every time you mend, it makes a difference, I think, on getting these fish to eat it. I think these fish are used to seeing that time of year. They're used to seeing these dead, calm drifts that everybody thinks that you want to fish. And I'll throw a curveball out there and say, hey, let's put some movement on this thing. Let's trick these fish. They're used to the calm drift. They've seen everybody do that. Let's bring this thing alive. So, a little 2 inches, 4 inches every time you mend it. If you get a little skate on the water, you obviously don't want to go under, but I think you're using the right float and stuff.
Yeah. Do you do that with your fly? I mean, it's got a lot of foam on it already, but do you put some floating on it?
I do. I run my own floatant. I like that Flyagra setup a lot. And then I'm running like a gel loon for top of a foamy for the most part. Cause a lot of times I'm like on a plan B fly or these little hoppers and they have this little foam post, right? Well, I also like that hopper body to lay low in the water. So I'll only lube up the top of it just to get those posts riding above the water. And I think a lot of these fishermen, when they see that fly 3/4 of the way or halfway down and into the water, same thing that makes them think, oh, this thing's dead. It's time to eat this thing. So I do use a little bit of the good lube. I like to make my own a little bit. I'll use a little lighter fluid and Abilene makeup remover, man. It makes some good stuff, but it's basically the same concept as the Flyagra.
Oh, really? So now this is to make your own fly floating?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And you do that just because you like, what is why make your own? Why not just go with the Flyagra?
I use a lot of it. And I also can control the viscosity, the thickness, my own recipe. I know some guys that like it lighter. I like to make it kind of thicker and heavier. I feel like you don't have to reapply as much, but it all depends on what your day's like. Because if you're getting a lot of those eats, you're reapplying all day. The fish are drowning that thing. It's time to reapply and refloat.
Yep, refloat. Cool. And then describe the take. What do you do when a fish hits on one of those bigger bugs?
Oh man, how exciting, right? Because that is the thing. You fly all the way here to watch a fish explode on a hopper or just nuke a big chubby or a squala. You gotta wait, right? You gotta wait. Everybody wants to give it the Olay, and I don't blame them because you know, all that. A lot of times we're fishing this clear water and that anticipation. You see the fish coming a lot of times, right? You see the big cutthroat, and sometimes these cutthroat come slow. It's crazy. I swear they're testing people. They're like, I'm going to come slow and let you see my body
Right.
before I even get to the surface. And you're going to pull, I'll know if it's fake because you're going to pull that thing right out of there. I don't have to worry about getting hooked. But yeah, I see the cutthroat tend to make this big, slow takeoff at it. They look like a great white shark coming up. And if you can control your emotions, you know, the Canadians say, God save the Queen. I think some Canadian anglers, that's their saying, right? For what, I don't know what it'd be in the United States, like one Mississippi.
Right. So God save the Queen is just, you basically say that before you set the hook.
Yep. Let them put their mouth on it, man. I have had to pull over and like, let's do some visualization, guys. The cutthroat are coming slow, but then you throw it on the undercut bank on the upper Clark Fork and you watch a 18-inch brown trout come out of there like a firecracker. You never knew it was coming. And all you see is the explosion on the top of the water. So it's always different up here. And which makes it, once again, makes it cool. You can get some different eats and see some different kind of explosive dry fly eats, and you see the sippers and you see all that stuff. But I'd say for most people, man, I got to tame everybody down on the early hook sets. You got to wait. You got to let them clamp down on it. And I'll pull over. I've had to pull over lots of times with clients. You know, I'll do some stuff like some techniques where we're like, let's close our eyes and think about this. You know, let's think about the fish swimming up and eating your bug. Imagine the fish putting its mouth around the bug before you set the hook. Because a lot of people want to say that I don't know if it really ate it. You know, that's the saying. I think they're mouthing it, Jake. Yeah, man, these things might die if they just mouth all these bugs. I don't know if they'd survive a winter. If they didn't know how to eat that bug, they might not survive. So
what are you doing when the big, you got a big chubby on, it rises and you set the hook too early? You're just didn't give it time to bite it, is essentially what's,
I'd say most of the time. I would say I definitely will side with my clients. I'm not here to hurt anybody's feelings. There's lots of times maybe the fish, you know, misconnection, right? There's two people. It takes two to tango, right? Maybe we're just off a little bit. Maybe the fish is just off. It's a little bit. Maybe we were a little early, but yeah, I'd say most of the time people are missing fish on those dry flies is that they are too early.
Yeah, it's too early.
Yeah, and my experienced anglers that show up, man, sometimes the experienced guys get me. I'm thinking, man, you should set, but they wait 1 second longer set, and a lot of them are nailing it. Jeff had some good dry fly eats, and he was letting them eat it when he was here on his trip, and it's awesome to see it when it happens and the dry fly bite is on up here. You see the right anglers making those moves, and I teach the anglers how to make those moves too, and being patient. You know, you drive a long ways, you fly a long ways to catch these fish. Let's be patient and make sure it happens, right?
That's awesome. Well, let's start to take it out here with our Fly Shop Friday segment. I always love to give a shout out. I'm not sure. I know there's a few shops. I'm not sure if there's new ones, but let's give a shout out to your local fly shop. Do you have a few out there in your area?
There's a bunch of good fly shops here in Missoula, but there's one fly shop that I stand by. These guys are awesome. This guy, Taylor from the Missoulian Angler, best fly shop in Missoula. These guys are pros. Everybody that works there, you go in there, they got a smile on their face. They're going to line you up anywhere from fly tying stuff, any gear you need for tying your own flies. They'll tutorial.
Oh, they have a bunch of resources online and stuff too.
Yeah, they do classes and they do some classes and stuff in the winter. But man, these guys, they got a variety of bugs. They have all the stuff for tying. They have the knowledge on the creeks, and all those guys at the shop are out fishing, which I love, right? They're all out there beating the water up themselves. So when you go into the Missoulian Angler, those guys are going to give you some knowledge. They're going to be friendly, and they're going to make sure you leave with the right bugs. You know, nothing but good things to say about those guys at the shop. I mean, that guy that he actually manages some guides too. They have guides and they do guided trips out of the Missoulian Angler, and all their guides are great. And, you know, he doesn't like to put out a lot of boats. One thing I got a lot of respect for the Missoulian Angler and some of these outfitters like him is that he's not going to go put 10 boats out on the river. And that's a big thing in Montana. You got a lot of outfitters coming up, myself being one of them, but he's limiting the pressure, in which I have a lot of respect for that. He's not going to put more than 5 boats, 6 boats out on the water, even though I'm sure he has enough business to do lots of it. So hats off to the guys at the Missoulian Angler, always doing a professional job.
That's awesome. No, it's a great shout out. And I've heard of those guys. I just hadn't chatted with them yet. So that's great to hear. Well, let's start it off with this as we kind of start to wrap it up here. Just a few tips. So we've been talking, the big bugs, but let's stay on the Clark Fork. just in general, if somebody's either fishing, summertime, let's just keep it in the summertime into the fall. What are you telling somebody if they're coming up there? What are some general tips you give them? Or maybe they're on the water with you. How are they having more success?
Man, I'd say let's use August, right? August is
Yeah.
a downtime. Sometimes people think that August can be tough fishing in Montana. If you show up ready to wake up early, that's a big thing. So, if you're on vacation, sometimes it's not easy to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, but let's get going early. Let's save these fish and get them when the water temps are cool, right? I always say show up ready and be adverse. Be ready to go somewhere else that you weren't expecting, right? Like you might be ready to fish the Bitterroot and your guide throws you a curveball and says, let's go up to the upper Clark Fork. And I'd say follow that guide. He or she is going to know where the fishing is that time of year. And I think if you can show up, like I said, being ready to go early in the morning and then adapting with the conditions, I'd say you're going to have a good time. I think that being able to throw the small flies and being able to throw the hopper dropper is a big thing. You could run into some tricos or some big fish sipping. So if you can be diverse in your abilities to angle and learn from your guide, I think you're going to have a lot of success, especially in August. I love that time of year.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So August is a great, and people think of it, I think now, because you hear a lot of the, what's it called? The hoot, or what's it called when they do the closures?
Yep. Hoot owl.
They do the hoot owl stuff, and that's kind of, August. But so August is still like, even with the hoot owl, are there places you can fish if you start early and all that?
Yeah. Hoot owl's at 2 p.m. off the water time frame. But I mean, if I get clients out, we'll be hitting the water at 6:30. You're still getting a full day of fishing in. But just like most people want to be off when it's 100 degrees anyways.
In some ways, that's a lot better because it gives you, the cool thing is it makes your day longer. That way at 2 p.m., you're like, man, I already got my fishing in. Now I got a whole half a day to go.
Yeah, and Missoula's got a lot to offer, man. We have a lot of good food around here. There's always live entertainment. There's street venues going on. There's just a lot of stuff to do. So getting off the water early is not necessarily the worst thing because there's a lot of things to do here. But I would say that August is a very underrated time in Montana. You're going to find a lot less competition out there, a lot less guides working, a lot less recreational floaters aren't wanting to go out there. But man, if you get the right day, trico fishing, hopper fishing, it's just fantastic, man. And you took from what I said, I like being by myself on the river. So it's a good time to be doing that.
So that's it. So tricos, hoppers, that's the summer. So in the summer, you're definitely fishing. And could you also nymph, do other types of techniques?
Oh yeah. And like I said, we're still seeing a big push of those nocturnal stoneflies, like big stoneflies, size 6 stoneflies. So we're doing a lot of nymphing, dry dropper more than just deep nymphing, but dry dropper still at that time of year. And that's also the best part about Missoula is there's not just one way to skin a cat here. You're going to have a good time fishing. And if your skills are high, well, go out and head hunt with tricos. And if you're just looking to put a couple fish in the net and enjoy the scenes, man, hopper dropper and go see some pretty floats. We definitely have a lot. We have the views and the scenic routes to go along with the fishing here too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You got the big sky country, right?
Oh man. Yeah. I could talk about it all day, man.
Nice. Give us a heads up before we head out of here on just anything with Pescador on the fly. We missed anything you want to highlight. With Jeff, we talked about a couple things. I asked him, I think the 6-piece rod is really, I think there's other 6-piece rods, but it's kind of cool because his rod, that's the one I was using, was the 6-piece, and you can't tell it's a 6-piece, right? It feels just like a 4-piece. What else would you say? Any other things on Pescador that, as you've been out with Jeff a little bit?
I like the straight to consumer, right? Direct to consumer. Yeah. I fished all the rods. I have a whole stack of rods out here in my garage, and they're all I like the quality, but the price point that Jeff's giving that high quality rod for is hard to beat. And like I said, you're going with this light action rod. I mean, it makes a big difference. If you're only fishing 2 hours a day, maybe you don't notice that, but you hop in my boat and I'm on you to fish a full 7-8 hour day. You're going to notice that, man, it's nice to have a high quality rod that's very lightweight that goes a long ways. And I also like the fact that this is one kicker that Jeff came up with. He throws an extra tip in there.
Yeah, I know.
That is, whether it's on the accidents happen, but I mean, a tip's going to get broken. The fact that you already are starting your purchase off with a backup tip, I mean, right there, I just love that part of the game because we're breaking rods in my boat at some point. I don't want to, but it's just the name of the game. If you have a rod long enough and, crazy stuff goes down on the boat when people are landing big fish and rods get broken or stepped on, whatever. So I like the fact that he's thrown in that extra tip. I like the lightweight action of the rod. And the other thing, like you said, if you're traveling with the 6-piece, that's great. But he also has that 4-piece for my rod vault that travels just great. And then you also throw in that man, the 7 weight that he's rocking right now for streamers. So throw a streamer all day with that thing, just ease of effort. I like the stiffness of that one too, because I feel like you're not having to do a lot of hard casting to get it to where you want to go. So I think that's one thing I like about all the rods Jeff's making out is that the performance is high, but the product is great, lightweight. So
Definitely.
yeah, exciting stuff out of that guy, man. He's always got something new coming out too. So every time I hear from Jeff, I'm always waiting to hear what's the next thing that he's got lined up, man. It's something new every time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love his he's also got I think with the first podcast we did with him, he was talking about his morning routine, which is like he's got it dialed. I always love because that's a struggle for me, getting the good morning routine. He's kind of got his workout done. He's eating good, he's definitely got his game together, right? I think that's inspiring.
He does, man. And got to appreciate he's a mentor of mine too, man. The guy sends me down the right path all the time. Every time I got a question, seems like he's got the right answer for me. So it's good to have him on my side.
Awesome. Well, a couple of random ones here and then we'll take it out. So we talked about the boats a little bit. You mentioned Missoula. So Missoula is kind of a college town, right? University of Montana.
Yeah.
Give us a couple. If somebody's coming through, they're excited now. They're going to be maybe fishing Rock Creek, Clark Fork. Where should we be stopping by if we're going to get some dinner or some food one of the evenings?
Oh, man. Missoula is it's on the spot. Back when fly fishing started getting big in Missoula, it was like fly shops or like a lodge, right? It was like, oh, you got to have a lodge, and the hotels weren't awesome here, 15 years ago. It has everything, right? It's a booming college town. Everyone wants to be in Montana right now. And so you come through, you want to I want to go see where the book A River Runs Through It was written about.
Yeah. Is that where it was? So was it what was the river? Yeah, it was the Blackfoot.
Yep. The big Blackfoot River, right? So you come here, you see the big Blackfoot River, you poke all the way from there into Missoula, and you go grab yourself a beer at the Kettle House Brewery. There's an amphitheater where you can go see, I think the Black Keys were just there last night, maybe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, right. So it's a small amphitheater. And then come into town, you got your ice cream shop, Big Dipper, world-class ice cream on a hot day. You can go get dinner at the depot deck. They just have everything. I would say back in the day, that was the thing, is people were trying to pitch these lodges and stuff like that. But man, we got multiple hotels here at great price points. Everything can be walking distance if you want it to be. So you could go get a hotel room at the AC Marriott downtown, and you don't even have to have a rental car. You can just walk to every restaurant. You can go see a live show and then be back at your hotel in 5 minutes.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because it's not a huge city, really. You can walk. It's a good walking city.
Yeah, I'd say everything's kind of circulates around, like downtown is kind of the scene, and you have plenty of restaurants. The bar scene is great if people want to come here, and it's not like a fancy nightlife, but man, you go there and you can go to the Missoula Club, which is like a kind of a dive bar, but a really cool history dive bar, and you can get one of the best cheeseburgers you've ever had, and followed up with a microbrew that is probably a local microbrew from Missoula. Yeah, so the diversity is there, the cuisine's there, they got plenty of good food, and then all summer long, I think the Roots Festival, where they have multiple bands coming in and playing downtown all over. I mean,
nice.
Live music here is great too. So that's the thing that's changed in Missoula. It's not just this off-grid fishing destination now. You have a lot of VRBOs, you have a lot of hotels, and the food and the entertainment goes with it. And I'd say that's what is putting us on the map big time right now. Not only do we have world-class fishing here, but you just have all the amenities to go with it.
Yeah, definitely. No, Missoula, is amazing. I'm excited to get back there for sure this year. Well, I guess, Jake, we could probably leave it there. I think we'll be chatting more, moving ahead. We could send, I guess, everybody out to MissoulaFlyGuy.com if they want to check in with you on trips, availability, and just maybe pick your brain on anything. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I'd say send me an email if anybody wants to ever book a trip. I run Missoula Fly Guy on my Instagram. A lot of people get to see what I'm doing all the time. I try to post my pictures and videos of what's going on there constantly. I would say I'm in the business of getting, the guys that have fished all over the world. I take those people fishing. That's great too. But I'm trying to get people in my boat that want to learn, and I'd love to make new relationships and form new relationships with people that want to learn and get into this fishing stuff. So if there's anybody out there that, is just trying to branch off and learn more and get more involved in fishing, send me a message, send me an email. Let's talk about it, because just like your situation, man, you got a 13-year-old daughter who's picking it up. And man, I tell people I specialize in getting those little kids really into it. And people talk about bringing their wives fishing. Missoula is great for that, because you're not just stuck out in this podunk town where there's nothing to do after the fishing trip. You're going to go get some good food. And man, I make sure the wives catch them too, man.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes the wives, and a lot of times the wives end up being better anglers than any of us will ever be. So
that's right. Love it.
I'd say tell your friends and definitely bring your kids, man. It's a very family friendly place to be in the summertime, is Montana.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be seeing more of it this year for sure. So cool, Jake. Well, we'll leave it there and send everybody out. We'll put links in the show notes to all that. And yeah, I just want to thank you again for all the time today, and definitely appreciate all the insight and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
If you're fired up to fish Montana's iconic rivers, or want to see what it's like to float Rock Creek like we talked about, most people, you're not seeing them do this. You can head over to MissoulaFlyGuy.com right now. We covered today from technical dry fly to the Clark Fork and everything in between. Jake's got it going. If you're thinking about planning a trip here and you want us to connect and get some more information for our Wet Fly Swing Pro community, you can check in right now. Go to wetflyswing.com/pro, and you can find out more how to get inside scoop on trips and everything we have going this year. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to this podcast. You can do that really quickly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Click that plus button. You'll get the next episode delivered to your inbox. And just want to give one shout out before we get out here. The Lodge at Palisades Creek, we're going to be doing a big event with them this year. If you haven't checked out the Lodge at Palisades Creek, the South Fork of the Snake, you can do that right now. Check in with them and check in with me. All right. Appreciate you for stopping in today. Hope you have a great afternoon. Hope you're having an amazing evening. And if it's morning, hope you have a beautiful morning and your day is a good one. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.